It's that time. Really kind of prepared this morning. So tried to do the awesome PowerPoint, but really, you figure as big as the internet is in Israel, trying to get pictures of Israel, I could find better pictures, but really it's really hard. They're all really tiny or small. So today we're going to talk about why Israel. Why did God pick the land of Israel? What was the point? Why? I mean, out of the whole world, we talk about, it's called the land of milk and honey, right? So, but really, if you've ever seen it, it's rocky. It's not this vast desert. It's just a lot of hill. It's very hilly. And there's a strip in the middle, the coastal plain, which is fertile ground. But really, you look at it, and the images I get from the Bible, I thought, it's just like the plains of text, just waves, and it's just awesome. And watching the video, the Ray Vanderlyn video, who goes there and actually looks at it, you're just like, wow. Okay, that is nothing like I pictured in my head. So you figure all the lush places in all the world, why did God pick this little strip of land? So why do we think God picked this strip of land? So right here in the middle, you have Africa, you have Asia, and right here in the middle is where, out of the whole world, all the vegetation and the different climates here, God picked right there. So what do we think? Why would God decide this is the land?
I think I remember from that those Ray Vanderlyn videos, that he called it the Crossroads of the world.
Yes, that's part of it, right? It's kind of, it's right in the middle, right? This is the Silk Route, because back in the ancient days, this was the strip. There were two ways to go. You have the Via Maris, the way of the coast, and you have the King's Highway. And if you're going from Egypt to Asia to do any trade whatsoever, this is the land you would take. So all trade, everything, like she said, all the crossroads has to go through this land. And if you're going to be God's people, you want to show the world, which what the Hebrews were, right? God said, I'm going to make my people. They're going to be the light of the world. You want to pick the land where everyone has to go through it. Paul did that same thing in Ephesus. Right, Paul was traveling around his first journey. He stopped by Ephesus, and Ephesus in that time was the major seaport. It was a double seaport. They would come in one way, unload their cargo, go to the next river either by land or by sea, and continue on. So Paul had the idea, you know what, instead of me going around preaching everywhere, why don't I just make a church and just preach here? Because when you're unloading cargo, it wasn't like today. It took 2 weeks, 3 weeks, so people were going to go see the Olympic Games. They're going to tour the city.
I just want to be clear. It was very much like that today. I had to wait on something in the port of LA for 3 weeks.
Just saying.
So, but while you're there, they're going to go visit and tour. So that's what Paul's idea was. He'd rent a theater, give a class, and people would go through. And through that, people would pick up the gospel, the good news, and then they would in turn go out all over the world and spread it. And so that's the same concept God did with this land. There's major trade, either by sea or by land. This city, Tyre right here, this was the only natural deep seaport. So cargo from here would go to Tyre, they would unload it to the land, and it would either go to Egypt or up to Asia. It's a natural seaport town, and it actually was when David became king. If you read, the first person that came to make a treaty with him was the king of Tyre, because they controlled the sea. David conquered the land, and they controlled the land. So together, that's how Israel built its wealth. You have to go through, you pay taxes, levies, everything. But more purposely, God was trying to build these people and spread his word, or see how these people were. So that was the point. Let's see. And how when God intended it through Joshua, this is the way the tribes were supposed to be. Now, it didn't quite end up because we failed, or they failed to conquer it. If you notice Dan, you see Dan in two places, right? Well, Dan was supposed to be right here. This is the main fertile, best land right here is where Dan was. And this is what Dan's land was, but they never conquered it, right? So because it was the Philistines, they had 4 coastal cities, and they were very highly fortified, and the Philistines, were pretty strong people. And Dan decided, for whatever reason, we're happy, and they just settled at the top. At the very top. So really, that's where Dan should have been. That's where Dan ended up. And of course, it was really, like Ray points out, kind of silly. So any attack or anything that's going to come from the north, they're the first ones that are going to get, conquered. And Assyria does come and conquer them. And you read after King Solomon, his son Jeroboam, there was a civil war. So you had the north and the south. And the north was Dan. That's where they built the 2 golden staffs. So you either go worship there or go to Samaria. So this is what God intended, and the whole point was, as you travel through this land, you're going to see worship, you're going to see God, and they're going to hear tales about, everything God did. That's one thing he pointed out. If you go there, you'll see these memorial stones. And we're going to talk about in the Jordan how they say get 12 stones from the river, put them up. And all over this land, you'll see these just random stone. And that's the whole point, to go what happened here? And then you explain, this is where we crossed the Jordan. And God delivered us, to go into the promised land. It's your telltale. And so we're going to go now to... Well, you have any comments or anything, or questions, or kind of a good understanding on why God picked this chunk of land? All right. So we're going to talk today. We're going to read Joshua 3, right? So this is the Israelites. They are getting ready they spent 40 years in the desert. God made them this hardened, strong people. Moses isn't crossing over. Moses gave them the blessing. God out of Deuteronomy told them the story. And so they're going to get up and they're going to cross the Jordan. So this is the actual Jordan River. This is a modern day. It's really not that much. When you read the story, how they held back the Jordan, and it was this kind of like crossing the Red Sea. But this is the actual Jordan River. And when they crossed the flood bank, it was full, so this would have been full of water, this whole area. So you can imagine, you're the priest, you're carrying the ark, and you got to walk in there. It's not like it's Corpus, right? It's shallow, it gets deeper, it's a mighty drop-off. And that was kind of funny. They were telling a joke. You wonder if the priests who were carrying the ark said, when they're about to cross it, hey, you know what, I was in front yesterday, it's your turn to be in the front today. It's kind of fighting who's going to be the first one to dip that foot in there. So let's go ahead and we'll read Joshua 3. I don't have a Bible up here.
Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out from Shittim. And they came to the Jordan, he and all the people of Israel, and lodged there before they passed over. At the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, as soon as you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God being carried by the Levitical priest, then you shall set out from your place and follow it. Yet there shall be a distance between you and it, about 2,000 cubits in length. Do not come near it, in order that you may know the way you shall go, for you have not passed this way before. Then Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And Joshua said to the priests, take up the ark of the covenant and pass on before the people. So they took up the ark of the covenant and went before the people. The Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that, as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. As for you, command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant. When you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan." And Joshua said to the people of Israel, "Come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God." And Joshua said, "Here is how you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is passing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore take 12 men from the tribes of Israel, from each tribe a man. And when the soles of the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from flowing, and the waters coming down from above shall stand in one heap. So when the people set out from their tents to pass over the Jordan with the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people, and as soon as those bearing the ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the brink of the water, now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of harvest, the waters coming down from above stood and rose up in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan, and those flowing down toward the sea of Arba, the salt sea, were completely cut off. And the people passed over opposite Jericho. Now the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan.
All right. What do we think about that?
I think I read it too much, too often. I've heard these stories of the Red Sea and the crossing the Jordan to stop and think very much about it anymore. And also we grew up in the land of no rivers. And so we have the Canadian River, which you could cross over without the waters parting.
On dry ground.
But you cross over like the Mississippi River once in your life, and you're like, now I know the Jordan's not the Mississippi, but I think about the Red Sea. But I mean, you think, oh, that this is a river that you don't get to cross. Like you don't just walk across or I'm gonna swim across. You're gonna be swept away, and the miracle that's actually provided, I think I miss way too often when I read these stories now.
And here's some data files about the Jordan River. It receives its name from a Hebrew word that means descend or to go down. So it starts 1,500 feet above sea level and at Mount Hermon in the northern Israel, and ends up 1,400 feet below sea level at the Dead Sea. And it's actually its own little ecosystem. It's pretty cool. The water flows down from the mountains in the Dead Sea. It's so salty it evaporates, kind of goes back to the mountains, and it just keeps this continuous cycle. It's about 200 miles from Mount Hermon to the Dead Sea. It flows through the Rift Valley, which basically it kind of cuts Israel right in half. It is one of the fastest flowing rivers for its size. Of course, today it's dammed up to help control it. So when you see it, you kind of fail to see how mighty it was. So, but this is pretty much the picture you get. And they had to walk across this through the brush and cross. And one thing why do we think God did it at flood stages? Why, of all the time, if you're going to send a people and conquer a land, why do you say, okay, now we're going to get up and go while the river is at the highest peak it's going to be all year?
I think it could be multiple reasons. It actually mentions at the time of harvest, if you're sending people into a new land, you're talking several million people, they're going to need food to eat. So when they cross over at harvest, they're going into a land with plentiful food for them all. Okay. But I think on the other side also it makes it more of a miracle, because I'm looking at this, and I'm not saying it'd be easy for 1 million people to get across, but it's, again, not the Mississippi. But if it's at its flood stages, I bet it looks pretty scary.
And it means to go down, right? So it's going something like 3,000 meters from 1,400 to 9,000. So you gotta imagine it's a fast flowing river. So it's, and one thing about, another reason I think God picked this time of the year was the people of this land, they worship Baal. And Baal was was the god of water, kind of like when we talked about Egypt, right? The Nile was sacred to Egypt. They had their gods, their whole story around it. But to the Israelites, you figure this is the main river in Israel, but to them it was more of a barrier. But to the people, Baal was their god of water and harvest and everything. So they were thinking, hey, the river, Baal's protecting us. Our God's protecting us because here's Israel trying to cross, and this water, there's no way they're getting over this water. I mean, it's just, they can't attack us this way. It's a shield. That's what they're thinking. And so God says, yeah, not right. Just like parting the Red Sea, now you see this sea being held back, so it's more of a trickle, and they're passing over dry ground. And one thing about Jericho, it is the oldest city they've uncovered. I didn't know that. But they had these mighty walls, 11, 12 feet, some areas 20 feet in the air. So all the people are up there watching this tribe go across, seeing this happen. So you can imagine, what are you thinking if you're them? I'm like, oh, crap. And then you read previously with Ruth, when the spies went in there, not Ruth. Was it Ruth?
Rahab.
Yeah, it was Ruth. No, Rahab. Rahab. Getting a wrong R. Rahab, she was like, we've heard of your God, and we're scared to death of your God because he devastated Egypt, and now he's coming over here. And now you can add to the fact that, okay, he just held the river back. He didn't split it. It basically, a couple of miles down, the water just stopped. So you can imagine this overflowing Jordan. It's just the water's being held back, and all the water just running and just emptying. So I just imagine that sight. So the people were scared.
And then I was just thinking of people downriver. Not only people in Jericho, but like people downriver, your river, if they're still, like you said, worshiping Baal and your God just dried up.
Yeah.
Like how that would impact them as this group of people following the one true God come across.
And pretty amazing. And then when they cross over, what do they do to defeat Jericho? They attack. Oh, they just go in circles. Not saying a word and just like this huge march around every day. And people are like, what? You just imagine. I love how God works. It's just this amazing. And then the other day the very last day, they go 7 days. And one theory on why Jericho's walls kind of fell, how they won, was, we're curious about what's going on. And all the people would be coming out and standing on these walls, just kind of watching Israel go around them. So you figure you had almost the whole town standing on these walls, just like, oh, same time of the day, Israel's going to do their march around, and then they're going to go back. And then they're going to march around, and, everyone's just saying what's going to happen. And then the last day, the walls fall, you pretty much just killed all the people, you destroyed all your enemies right there, and conquered the land. So, pretty amazing. So you really think about, we kind of read the story and it's kind of like, oh yeah, they circled around. But if you really try to picture it in your head, crossing the Jordan, walking around Jericho, one of the most fortified, powerful cities of this time, and God just levels it without fighting at all, raising a sling or a spear or anything. God just takes it out. Let's see. So, and that's kind of the point going to this is, ultimately the lesson when you go through the whole series is we can't do anything, right? And I think that's one thing we kind of look at people who conquer, these armies did it. But really, in this case, it was God. And here's a people that were afraid. Remember the reports they have from Joshua, these are big people, they're strong people, these cities are fortified. So ultimately, God, you can't do anything. And I think that's one thing in my life I've kind of realizing and I try to do is I can control nothing. I can only do what God's going to do it. And so to us, I think the bigger point of this story is we can't do. I know we want to be Christians and go out there and conquer, do all this, but you really can't do it. And God's not looking for someone to do that. What's nice is God's just looking for people to get their feet wet. Just, someone to go step your foot in the water. Can you step your foot in the water? Are you willing just to step the foot in the water? I'll take care of everything else. And that's really where we're going to go. And so today, just like Israel trying to start, the conquest of the promised land to get all this, what barriers today keep holding us back? Like today in this world, going out there, because God's supposed to be number one in our life. We talked about we're a mobile tabernacle, essentially. So people should see us and be in awe. It's like, oh, wow, you radiating God, right? God lives in us. He's dwelling in us. So what barriers today hold us back from just getting our feet wet, just stepping in and letting God do it? They say let go and let God. What barriers do we face today?
Fear of the unknown.
Fear of the unknown.
Right away, I'm like, is there rocks? Do I have my water shoes? Do I have a first aid kit if I cut my foot? But
Yeah. All right. So let's see do a little history lesson here. If someone wants to look up Numbers 13, 27 to 32. So this is what kind of reports that the spies, other than Joshua and Caleb, bring back for the exploration of the land of Canaan. So Moses, first time, he sent spies in there, check out the land. What is this land all about? Because none of them have ever been there.
And they told him, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of Negev. The Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. Then the men who had gone with him said, we're not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people we saw are of great height.
Great height, okay. So how does that translate today? Are there people keeping us barriers from going in? What kind of people are in your lives that keep you from, doing the report, being like Caleb, right? You're either Caleb or you're the other. Caleb and Joshua were the ones, yeah, we can do this, let's do it. And then everyone else was like, no.
I think a lot of things, one of the first things, they came in and just basically vomited fear all over them. Like, oh my gosh, it's awful. We'll all die. If you go in there, it's going to be horrible. And I think, as Christians, that we allow that to happen to us through specifically you see it in news outlets. That's how they make their money, is to initiate fear in you. And I watch that happen to so many people I know and love that follow the Lord very strongly. But, I've watched over the years, their behavior mimics that. I know people so well. They won't get on an airplane anymore because they can't take their guns with them or whatever. I'm like, are you kidding me? Seriously? But I'm just but they've created that fear enough, and it's can't go to the land. Can't go there and I've seen that a lot.
Oh, absolutely. And two, you got to think at this point, this is the first time, so they just crossed the Red Sea. They just were at Mount Sinai, got the law. They saw a pillar of cloud and what he did to Egypt. And so this is only, they were there, this is like a year after all that happened when they finally set out to do this. So they witnessed, all these people witnessed everything God did, and they were still scared. And that kind of, where I feel I am right here. I feel even more ashamed because it's like, man, God's done all this stuff in my life. He's taken care of me. I've been overly, super blessed in my life, and you're still afraid, And I feel like, I think a lot of people look back at Israel and like, oh, I wouldn't have done that. It's like, no, I'm doing it today. Just, I'm the same people. They are. I'm not Caleb. I'm not trying to be, but I'm more of Joe Smith, just
I remember
Israelite.
when we were adopting our sons, and we decided to take our 3 young daughters, 6 months, 2 years, and 3 years old, or not quite 3 years old. I can't remember how old. Anyway, we had so many people in our church that they were basically doing what these guys were doing. Like, you shouldn't take your girls over. Something bad could happen to them. They could get kidnapped. They could get killed. They could get raped. And, we started questioning whether or not, we felt like we were supposed to, but we immediately were like, are we making the right choices? Should we do this? And so, yeah. Like, just speaking, like fear. Like, it's going to be bad. It could be bad.
And I think, like, on that thought, I always find it interesting the fact that, we know that they're saying a bad report. We know that they're saying that they're responding out of fear. But verse 32 says, so they gave a negative report to the Israelites about the land they had scouted. That word for negative in Hebrew is the same word for evil. Like, it is literally saying it is an evil report that they brought to Israel. And that's why, at least in seeing it from God's perspective, that the reason they get that curse later in the next chapter is like all Israel refuses to enter Canaan. They decide to succumb to fear and not trust God, and the whole plan is to enter the promised land and enjoy the land, but instead they are just driven by fear. And exactly what you said, like, God has just brought them in those miraculous of ways, and yet they are still refusing to trust the Lord. And in this moment, the idea of just that word evil, it's like, I don't think God has a problem with us being afraid, but I think it's when that fear just takes over and overwhelms anything else in our lives. I think I would rather have people that are afraid but still give it up to the Lord and say, all right, like if they had said, like for example, Caleb said, they may be big, they may be strong, but we can still take them, we have God. But then the man just said, we can't do it. We can't do it, we shouldn't do it, it'll be foolish to do it. I think that gives God nothing to work with, and so that is evil because we're shutting out the Lord. And so I think that's one of those things when I wrote it here, because I remember learning about that in seminary. It's like, man, fear is not the problem, it's when we don't let God stand next to us in our fear.
It's the garden all over again. Choosing the tree of good and bad versus trusting God.
Yeah.
Man's wisdom versus God's wisdom.
All goes back to Genesis.
Well, because I think what you said, Moses, is really important. Caleb wasn't like, oh, it's not that bad. He was like, it's legitimately that bad, and also we can overcome it because we have the power of the Lord. Because I find it equally frustrating when there genuinely is something to fear. When people are like, oh, it's not real. I'm like, no, it's real. Like, there is a real thing to be afraid of here. That is equally annoying and frustrating and a stumbling block when you're like, no, there's a real thing here that we have to address. But the only way to address it is to say we put our trust in the Lord, and that's how we're going to overcome. Because that's the other side of that is it's not like they were wrong. They weren't telling a lie about what was in the land. What was there was bad and scary. It's just that the whole truth involves saying, that the Lord can overcome this.
And that was the whole point of the desert. The desert, why it's so powerful, why God cursed them, was it builds community. They literally were dependent on manna every day. Like, if God didn't bring down manna, we're not eating. And that's what God had to do. You had these Egyptian people that were scared. He had to kill that whole generation and build this, the generation that decided to go in, they were battle hardened. All they knew was God. You're growing up in the desert, and all you know is God. You see the temple, the tabernacle every day. You eat manna, God provide. It's all about God all the time. And They were able to do a lot. Of course, they kind of stopped. They kind of settled and didn't get forward. So let's read Numbers 14, 1-4. So this is the actual impact this testimony had on the people.
And the whole community broke into loud cries, and the people wept that night. All the Israelites complained about Moses and Aaron, and the whole community told them, if only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to die by the sword? Our wives and children will become plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? So they said to one another, let's appoint a leader and go back to Egypt.
Ooh, yeah, kind of adds to that. Elect a leader and go back to Egypt. So after everything God just did, now after God and you were part of the destruction of Egypt, you want to go back to Egypt. I don't think you're going to be very welcome there. They kicked you out. They literally said, get out. Here's gold. Here's diamond. Get the hell out. Get away from us. We don't want to see you anymore. Sorry. And now they're like, we should go back. It's been a year. Make friends. They're over it. We just decimated the entire Egyptian, most powerful country in the world's economy. It's cool. It's cool. But how do we do that? When we don't step into that river, we kind of get that fear. Like you said, it's evil and overcomes us. We fall back into our old habits, right? That old self, right? We're supposed to do. Literally, you go in the water, you're reborn, the new self. But we always fall back to that old self. It's comforting. I guess you grew up that way for so long, but so these people want to go all the way back. Okay, so let's read Numbers 14, 6-9.
And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh who were among those who had spied out the land and tore their clothes, and said to all the congregation of the people of Israel, the land which we passed through to spy it out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them.
All right. And you got two guys tore their clothes, making a scene, saying, no, we can do this. You got to trust. So they were legitimately upset, which is, why they're the only two from Gen 1 that went out of Egypt that lived to actually go into the promised land. Everyone else died. So that was we got the bad report. People were afraid. They wanted to go back to Egypt. And except for Jacob and Caleb, they were like, we can do this, guys. We got God. So let's move on to Joshua 2, 23-24. The second time Israel was poised to enter the promised land, Joshua sent out 2 spies. And notice how the report was different from the first report.
When the 2 men returned, they came down from the hills and passed over and came to Joshua the son of Nun. They told him all that had happened to them. And they said to Joshua, truly the Lord has given all the land in your hands, and also all the inhabitants of the land melt away because of us.
All right, so 40 years later, what kind of report do they get now? Kind of.
Same report that Joshua and Caleb did.
Yeah, they were ready, right? Who was ready to get their feet wet? Because these people were a little more confident, right? I guess live in the desert, trusting God. Like, yeah, we can take them. Okay, so let's read Joshua 3, 1-5. When Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out from Shittim, and they came to the Jordan, he and all the people of Israel, and lodged there before they passed over. At the end of the 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, as soon as you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from your place and follow it. Yet there shall be a distance between you of 2,000 cubits in length. Do not come near it, in order that you may know the way you shall go, for you have not passed this way before. Then Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourself, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. So why did the ark go in front of them?
Because I had the presence of the Lord. So that was what was going to clear the path.
Yes, it's all about God, right? Because they were realizing we can't do this. God can do this, and God's going in front of us. But I like the distance, right? We kind of look over that. But 2,000 cubits is about half a mile. It's like, not only am I going to lead you, I'm going to lead you. I'm going to be way where you can barely line of sight, see me, but I'm going to take care of you. So God, again, just showing, this is me. This is my power. This is what I'm going to do. So what barriers do we think keep us from having this kind of trust in God? Right? He's kind of already set the path. He's 2,000 cubits or half a mile in front of us, and we're kind of lingering behind. What keeps us from just trusting God to go through here? You know, we kind of talked about fear of people, but what other things keep us from just being like the people? They were ready to go, right? There was no question. There was no whining. They just said, hey, on this day when you see the ark go, get up, get ready. We're crossing the Jordan. So no fear with these people. So what are some obstacles that keep us from having that kind of confidence in God today?
I think we lose sight of the Lord, so to speak, like that. You know, it's something, you know, you watch the Lord work in your life, and then there's a time that passes, the ark's getting out in front of you, and you start to lose sight of that, and then something else happens. And you so you just kind of forget about it. And that's where we've talked about this a lot. Like, I think those markers, those stones are so important, so you can go back and be like, okay, hang on just a second. He did part the Jordan for us. I got to remember that. But yeah, usually it's that for me. It's like, I mean, it might be a day. It may not be a year. It may be short-lived, and you forgot what happened yesterday already. Because, you know, the human rust wants to take over.
That's a good point. I never thought about that. Maybe he's too far ahead of us for us to catch up.
I think like one of my obstacles would be like just, I guess I would simplify it as distraction. Like the idea of God being, or like at least the symbol of God and the ark being so far away that the people have no choice but to focus on the ark. Like they have to focus to not lose sight of it, to not get lost. And I'm thinking like, well, if I was there, that's a big problem because I get distracted so easily. Like, give me a good dust ball rolling along. I'm like, oh man, mom, dad, like everybody, cousins, everybody. And so, I don't know, like maybe another way of saying losing sight of God, but it's just kind of like something else just takes priority. And very quickly, like, or a moment where I should have been trusting the Lord and waiting patiently, focusing on Him, I lost sight and now I'm lost. And I think that has happened too many times in my life where I at least know to recognize it when it's happening, but the fact that it still happens.
Yeah, it's good you recognize it. That's just, having a positive impression.
It's
better to be oblivious.
It's a first step.
It's a baby step. You have your toes in the water.
You're getting there. I think sort of related to distraction is like a false contentment. I sort of think, what's the difference between these people and the people 40 years ago? Well, 40 years ago, they're like, fine, we'll go back to Egypt. It's all right. Like, that was never going to be fulfillment for them. But they did know that it could be comfortable. They had lives there, they had homes, they had babies there. Even if it was terrible, it was more familiar. And these people have spent 40 years in the desert. They're desperate. They have a desperation that I lose so easily because I got a house, I got a car, I got, whatever. I have everything I need, really. And so I just think there's like a false contentment that slips in where I'm just like, okay, it's fine, everything's fine, I'm fine. I don't need to seek more or seek out what the Lord has for me in any real way.
Oh, it's awesome. It's kind of hard.
Related to that, it's
Okay.
always, to me, the obstacle is kind of related to these two. But you tend to, we live in a society where you're encouraged to tackle problems. You're in charge of your life. You know, we teach our kids, you know, you need to be responsible for all this, do this and this and that, and we also think of it as a virtue. You take care of yourself, you try to tackle these problems. Then we become more independent, more competent. So to me, Joshua and Caleb are amazing because they saw that they're giants and there is no reasonable way that we may fight and win without God. They knew it, but they still trusted it. So it's almost like fighting against their reason. And that's very difficult. And I completely agree with you when you said, I'm the same with these people. I'm exactly that type of people. Like I don't even say that, well, how can you do this? You look at the miracle and then the next day you turn. I'm exactly that person. So to me the obstacle is, you know, my own self and tendency to believe my own self. Because I live like that most of the days, most of the time. I know that if I move this, it will go over here. I know it from experience. So it's just kind of accumulation of all those things.
That's really a really good point. We are, that independent nature is, we're taught, in the Western world it's more, that's like one of the parts of desert, right? Desert, you have to depend on community. You cannot just go out there yourself and survive. You need a community, right? And that's a very good point that we're Americans, you know, we do it ourselves. You know, even Texans are even worse, right? It's like, don't mess with Texas. But I think that's a very good point. I think that's the way we grow up. You know, you teach your kids instead of like, let God do that. You know, I don't emphasize that enough with my kid. Just, you know, like, go make your sandwich. Do it yourself. You know, you try to push him to do that. And it's a very good point, Sinead.
It's a fine balance between a fearful mother and a fearless father raising a child.
Yeah. Anything else? So, all right. So we're going to move on to Joshua 3, 9 to 11. So 9 to 11, it says, "And Joshua said to the people of Israel, 'Come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God.' And Joshua said, 'Here is how you shall know the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and all the earth is passing over before you into the Jordan.'" So basically what Joshua is saying right there, right? He's saying this is how you're going to know it, because God's going first. He's going to walk in, you're going to see it, and he's got you. You know, that's one thing about Joshua. You always see this exuding confidence. You know, that's what I love about Joshua. He's just never doubts God. The whole time you see him, he's just always there. So, so what do we think things we can do to become Joshua? What do you think we can...
Well, I think one key here is he says, "Come here and listen to the words of the Lord our God." And he doesn't say, "Come here and listen to me." And I think it's the same for us. When we have something that's hard that we have to tackle, we need to go to the Word and not to our own thinking or go first for our friend's opinion, which is usually what I do. And I think, you know, I have some wonderful devotional books that I read every morning, but they're not the words of God. I mean, they have verses in them. And then maybe at the bottom it says, "For further encouragement, read Ephesians, da-da-da." And don't do that. Like, I'm out of time, I gotta go. So it's listening to God's word to me that gives Joshua courage.
Someone made that point. It was a little sermon on Air One she said, "Do you look up or do you look down when there's a problem?" And she's talking about cell phones, right? Whenever something happens, we go to the cell phone and we look down to what's the problem, look it up, or do you look up first before you look down to what do you do first in your daily life? And I thought that's a really powerful point is I look down, it's like, why does that happen? What happened? You get the little ding, and our first reaction is, oh, I can't believe he said that, instead of, there's a lot of like this political season, right? Elections coming up. You see all these politicians, and they get their little snipes. This guy did this, and it's more. We sit there and like, oh, look what he did, and we like kind of tag people, send it, whatever we do, instead of like praying for the person. Like, you know what, this guy needs prayer. We should. People calm down. That's typically our reaction. The way most people. I'm trying to curb that when I see it. I kind of try to stop and pray, and not read the gossip. Right? It's so tempting to be like.
He doesn't need to. They go to look.
It's hard. That gossip is. It's really for me, that's a killer. You want to know what's going on.
I think on top of that, which I totally agree with you, is and this is the hard part, is having a Caleb, or if you're a Caleb, having a Joshua, somebody who's going to stand there and trust in the Lord with you, or, encourage you to do, because you saw the rest of Israel in the previous chapters, like, they weren't the guys that you wanted as your friends encouraging the Lord. And with these two, I think that would be a good thing to have, whether it be your wife or your husband or an outside friend, to be there and like, hey.
And do you get annoyed at the Joshua though? Too? I think that's
Yes.
another thing. We can do this, guys. Let's do this. All powerful, and you're just like, dude, calm down, stop, man. You feel bad. That's what
People would get annoyed with you. I have seen this.
Trust the story. Every morning, trust the story. I'm like, I will trust the story.
Well, and I think the great thing about the story of Joshua is that it doesn't start in the book of Joshua. It's like way back in Exodus. Like, he is very bold in being like, so can I come with you? Like even with Moses, he's like, can I come in with you? Can I go with you? Can I go into the tent of meeting? He just never stops pursuing that closeness to the presence of God. Not ever. Like all the way through, he's just like, really pretty bold in his like insistence on like, but I want to come too, even when it's not, even before it's his time and his place. And I think that's, you kind of have to be assertive about pursuing the presence of God. It's not a passive thing.
So
it's a very active.
you would say you need to want it.
Yeah.
So we need to want it.
And you need that courage. And the other one that was really good, I reread like the Bema podcast. He went into the story of David. And really, David is such a... I can
finish that sentence.
He's just an amazing character. But when he started off, this shepherd boy, but he really got into the speech on why his brothers were mad at him. Because really, when you stop and you analyze the words on what David said, he basically called everybody a coward. And the one thing he uses is like, they're uncircumcised, meaning, circumcision was the sign between guys like, we got God's blessing. We have God's confidence. And you're sitting here scared. I'm going to take this dude off because I have God on my side. And there was no doubt in this kid's mind. He was just like, no, I can do it. But the way he worded and the way he went, even he said it to Saul. That was the amazing thing. The king is like, I can't wear this. But really when you start analyzing that and like the words he actually said, I was like, holy cow, this 12-year-old boy just basically told the whole army of Israel, like, y'all are cowards. I'm going to take this. But it's that same concept of, getting his feet wet in the water. He went out there, no doubt. And then he talks crap to Goliath, who's 7'6". Like, you may come, you're like, what is this dog you insulting? He goes, I got the power of God. But he said the same thing, right? I'm not going to do this. God's with me. He's going to strike you down. And I know Jesus always did the same thing, right? Jesus said, why do you call me good? Only my Father's good. It's all about these key people in the Bible. It's always about, well, God's going to do this. It's never about self, me. It's, God's going to do this. And that's that theme, these, people in the Bible, these heroic leaders, even Moses, kind of messed up on the rock, striking the rock. But for the most part, at the end, it's about God. It's God's going to do this. And that's his whole point, right? The whole point of the desert was, I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to test you. Trust me, trust me, trust me. I will take care of you. And that's what we have to remember. I know there's a lot of barriers, and it's easy to said than done, but I don't know. But that's just something I think we really need to walk on. Because that's one thing they kind of brought up. This point is, like reading Revelation, like the new heaven and new earth, right? We're not going to magically transform. Because I kind of look at it when Jesus, we're not going to become these totally new people that are perfect and don't fight and argue. If we're going to make it to the kingdom of heaven, we need to be like God, right? How you live your life here is how you live. And if, God is perfect, he cannot be in sin. That's something you think about, right? It's, like you said, it's not really, there's a lot of distractions, right? And everything gets in the way. But if you're not a nice, kind person, like loving, that's the kind of people that are going to be in heaven. Your body might change so you can be in the, you get in the, you have to transform. You'll be able to be in the presence of God. But how you live now, you're not going to magically die, be judged, and all right, you're perfect now. You're no longer going to hate. You're no longer going to fear. Though, granted, I think there's going to be a lot less distractions and stuff to fear in heaven. But so that's something to think about, that this is important. And this is the, steps for Israel. The desert was actually the start of it. But getting into here, settling the land, and they failed big time. And the whole rest of the story is book of redemption, right? They fail, God saves them. No, we're enslaved. And you see, when you get into Judges, we have 40 years of peace, great. Now we're slaves again. It's up and down. It's all about the redemption. And it's okay to fail. Just keep getting your feet wet, and just really think about what kind of person you are now and how you want to be, because I struggle with that a lot. Like, are you going to make it to heaven? Are you make it not? What do I need to be? But really, I'm not that person. So I am still the Israelite. So we need to encourage each other, right? I think, Russ, you said it. You have to have that person to encourage each other, checking in on people and just being. And I don't think we do that enough. That's the whole point of the church family, right? This is our family. This is our church family. This is what we're supposed to do. We kind of meet on Sunday, and yes, we worship together, and that's it during the week. So, anyone else? Thoughts, conclusions? Everyone ready to get their feet wet?
Let's go.
Huh? Let's go. And that's a test out there. All right. Well, we finished it. All right. So we'll end with a prayer. Father God, thank you for this time, your word, everything you did for this Old Testament book, showing us how to, get our feet wet, to go out there, be the Joshuas and the Caleb, and to be those people. We need to be out there in the world, because the world does need it. It's huge darkness right now, and it needs your light, and that's what we're supposed to be. So encourage all of us, help us to remember these stories, your word. Go to your word first, and just be shining lights for you, so that you can make this world a little better place, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.